black raspberry LaCroix because 'tis the season. Hello, dudes, dudettes, duders, and everyone in between, and welcome to How to Do Everything So You Don't Have to, a series where we teach you how to think like a producer. In this video, we're going to look at the top 3 tools in our kit that are not only absolutely essential to all of our productions, but also have nothing to do with the camera or the audio chain. And because you came here for information and not for marketing, we aren't going to mention any brand names. You will not find any of the gear discussed linked in the description below because, and I cannot stress this enough, 95% of the problems we see on productions have nothing to do with the gear, and 95% of the content watched on YouTube is about gear. Let's get into it, starting with comms. Productions live and die by the team's ability to move information. You can't frame a beautiful or even competent shot if the team doesn't know which direction to point the camera. You can't light a scene if you don't know what's going to be in it. You can't write a script if you don't know what the story is about. Without clear and efficient communication, you have nothing. You don't even have a blank screen because nobody knew to get a screen and put it there. And that's where comms come in. Productions are fluid creatures with parameters constantly changing in real time. If there's a chance that someone on your team won't be within earshot when information changes, you need to get a good comms system. Classic example, a PA has been sent to the staging area to get a 35mm lens. While they're gone, the DP changes their mind and wants a 50mm. If you don't have comms, the task immediately takes twice as long because the PA doesn't find out until they've returned to set with the 35. Think of how many tasks a day take twice as long because you aren't on comms with your team. Now multiply that over all of your productions throughout the year. The good news is that you don't need a top-of-the-line system to get this one moving. You just need something, not nothing. We prefer single-ear headsets with an over-the-ear design and the ability to engage and disengage the mic by turning it up and down. Even more important than the brand you buy are how people behave when using comms. We have very strict rules regarding comms engagement on our productions. In fact, I'm going to give you the exact comms monologue that we give every time we're onboarding new talent, because it covers everything you need to know for day 1 comms use. Here we go. Close your mic unless you're talking. The first couple of times you leave your mic open, we will say open mic. If you are a repeat offender, we will name you first and then say open mic. If it continues to continue, we will stop saying open mic and just repeat your name until you close your mic. At that point, assume you won't be invited back to shows that require comms, and every show we do requires comms. But this shouldn't be a problem because most of what's said over comms will be said by me. Your mics will be closed 99% of the show today. Comms is not a place for chit-chat, jokes, or commentary on how the day is going. Only jump on if you have mission-critical information that the team would benefit from hearing or if a response has been solicited. So if you're on camera and I tell you to pan right, don't engage your comms and say copy, just pan right until I tell you to stop. I will make it clear when a response is necessary, and if you do respond, do so with the fewest words possible without compromising clarity. Furthermore, comms isn't just for us, it's also for the client. We're a guest in their house, and our goal is to keep disruption to a minimum, both in terms of gear and in terms of noise. There is no reason to call across a room or raise your voice to communicate information. If you're going to speak on our sets, say it calmly. If everyone needs to hear it, say it calmly on comms. Our job is to keep the complexities of production, including emotions, positive and negative, invisible from the client, and a huge part of that is keeping a pleasant, innocuous demeanor throughout the day. If you break a $5,000 lens, I don't want to hear anything more animated than, "Oh, fiddlesticks," because that lens can be replaced with $5,000. Clients are much harder to swap out. Animated gestures, curse words, and broad vocal apologies don't fix the lens. All they do is put the client relation at risk. If it has to be said over comms, say it calmly and stop talking as soon as the information is in the ears of the person who needs to know. Finally, if you hear the phrase precious cargo over comms, stop talking about whatever you're talking about immediately. Don't mention it again or your job will be at risk. Whatever the topic was and whatever the reason was that we don't want it discussed will be addressed after wrap. Precious cargo is the kill switch on any conversation. If you hear it in person or over comms, the entire team is on red alert until the day is done. Now look, if you do production regularly, nothing I've said was surprising at all. If you're newer to production, it might sound like a lot of tough talk designed to make newbies tremble. I'll admit, there is a performative aspect to it, and I might get a little more flowery than necessary to get the point across, but the reality is that our shows live and die by comms. If communication is clear, our productions thrive. If communications are sloppy, our productions flounder. That's why we keep the reins really tight on the information moving within our team. But that's not the only kind of information we need flowing smoothly. Let's get into teleprompters. If we're filming, it's really likely that there are people in front of the camera. If there are people in front of the camera, it's really likely that they're trying to communicate something. For example, I'm people in front of a camera trying to communicate something right now, and guess what? There is a teleprompter chugging along, making sure I get the vital points out as efficiently as possible. There are a couple of pieces necessary to get a prompter up and running properly, and while I will cover components in this video, I'm not going to make any brand recommendations. As with all things in production, it's not the brand that gets you across the finish line. It's an understanding of what you're doing and why. So, the first thing you'll need is beam splitting glass. What this does is reflect 30% of the light hitting it and transmit 70% through. What this means is that light heading towards the lens will function at 70% intensity of what you metered before adding the prompter. The light heading towards the subject will hit at 30% intensity of what went out from the monitor you're using to prompt. Legibility shouldn't really be a problem because you're most likely sending text, which will be high contrast white on black. Because the beam splitter is cutting light to the lens, you'll either need more light on your set or you'll need a lens that can open up wider. We prefer to increase light on set because you can always add more lights. Lenses aren't quite so forgiving because eventually physics kicks in and the lens can't go any wider regardless of the budget. We used to use a tablet for our prompter software, but there were a couple of problems with tablets and we don't recommend starting there. The first problem is that you control your read speed remotely, either with a coupled phone or a dedicated scroll device, and lost connections were common enough that it wasn't responsible of us to use them on paid jobs. The second problem was that tablet software is increasingly moving towards subscription models, and the idea of paying a monthly fee to scroll text was silly billy to us. So we moved to a laptop with dedicated software for our prompter. This is a bit bulkier to travel with, but the real cost comes with the need for a dedicated operator. It might seem costly, but if you do it correctly once, it's really hard to go back to doing the job poorly. Not only do we consider the prompter to be mission critical on the shoots that use it, we know that the client is going to be staring at it as long as they're on camera. You really don't want to be sloppy with the piece of gear that the client is going to be staring at as long as cameras are rolling. And I'd like to take a moment to remind you what the job of a producer is. To move information. Hardware, software, and wetware should be invisible to the client. The average CEO or marketing rep from a company likely hasn't clocked their 1,000 hours in front of a camera or reading off of a prompter. You want to make the process as natural as possible for them. A big part of keeping it natural is to be in constant communication with on-camera talent and adjusting your workflow as is necessary. We solicit feedback on the speed, font, text size, and other technical concerns to help fine-tune their experience, but we also try to stay sensitive and alert regarding their needs and moods throughout the shoot. Of course, feedback doesn't end when the teleprompter comes down. One of the most important tools in our kit is one that we bust out before load-in and we keep on hand well after the production is wrapped. Let's talk about RFI Notes. The health of every production we do boils down to one single document, RFI Notes. RFI stands for Room for Improvement, and this is a document that collects every bit of feedback that we get in tick box format. As notes get addressed, we tick off the box. This feedback can come from the crew, the client. Heck, if someone is walking by and they see something that could be done better, that feedback is warmly welcomed and entered into the RFI doc. This is, without a doubt, the least fancy of all production concerns, not just in this video, but in our entire workflow. RFI documents really just boil down to haiku-length notes organized as a checklist. They are rife with typos, as fidelity isn't nearly as important as expediency. When we hit a bit of friction, we jot it down, and then we move on with the production. And RFI isn't done when the gear is packed up. As soon as we're wrapped, we round up the crew and have one RFI meeting, and then a smaller team holds a separate meeting with the client. When we do the team meeting, we include every member of the crew because, wouldn't you know it, the PAs are noticing a lot more broad scope friction than the DP. Honestly, if the DP is getting tied up in more friction than your PAs, your production probably has problems RFI Notes can't fix. But that's a topic for another day. The client conversation is separate because they don't need to know about problems we had internally if they weren't aware of them already. But this one is just as important as crew RFI. The client understands their needs better than we do and might be able to identify errors in intent or execution that are invisible to us. But be careful. If you ask the client for improvements that they'd like to see, they will give you a roadmap. If you don't follow it, you just turned a 6-foot grave into a 12-foot grave. So only ask for feedback if you're actually going to implement it. What RFI comes down to is diligently documenting the ways in which your productions fall short and then sanding down those rough edges. It's really that simple. The hard thing is actually doing it. But if you are able to apply RFI consistently, you'll find that there's no sensor plate or lens or autofocus system that will accelerate your career quicker. It's a competitive landscape in the world of media production, especially in LA. Your competition is constantly pushing forward, which means that if you're not pushing forward too, you're actually moving backward, and that is no way to run a business. That's why we treat RFI with the same care and investment that we would a camera or lens, perhaps even more so. As we see it, the purchase of our next camera is directly tethered to our ability to stay competitive and to increase capacity. Money is a very small piece of that puzzle. More important than money or gear is a capacity to continuously identify workflow weaknesses and improve upon them. Have you noticed what all the topics in this video have in common? They are all methods of moving information, whether it's using comms to keep up with constant changes typical of production, making sure the talent has the information they need to present well on camera, or keeping diligent notes on how your workflow can be improved. These concerns all point in one direction. To a hammer, all problems look like a nail. To a producer, all problems pretty much boil down to how well information is moving within your production. If it's moving smoothly, you're producing well. If it's not, you're failing at the core conceit of your job. And if that's the case, there's no camera or lens that will fix the problem for your business. The only way to get better at moving information is by moving information around. If your skill set isn't quite where it needs to be to remain competitive, you need to be crewing more. If you're crewing a lot and still not there, you need to be crewing on larger shows. There are 3 main ways to achieve this. First, you could work on projects that function on a larger scale than what your company typically executes. Second, you could overstaff productions on your current docket so that you can do reps with a larger crew. Finally, you could be initiating projects internally that will require large teams. Each one of those could be an entire video, so we won't dive in right now, but we could in the future. Regardless, the only way to get better at moving information in larger crews is by moving information in larger crews. If you're looking for crew opportunities or just want to connect, you can always reach out through our website. If you enjoyed this video, I'd invite you to subscribe or jump into the chat to keep the conversation going. Tell me where I'm wrong. We are actually getting engagement, and I thought it might be fun to pick a top comment and give a shout out to a member of our audience. Username @ManOfTime jumped in on a recent video to say, "You have a weird thumb, bro." Thanks for the comment @ManOfTime. However, you're wrong. I have 2 of them. And there's a reason I have two, and that is to tell the following joke. What has two weird thumbs, bro, and wants you to stop watching YouTube and instead go work on the flow of information in your ever-growing portfolio of productions? This guy. Eh? And look, they're not that weird. Maybe they're a little weird. Or maybe they're not weird to me because I've been looking at them for 40 years now. I think the one he saw is a little bit weird because it might have some dirt underneath the nail, but that's not weird. That's just indicative of being busy. I never thought I'd say this, but kind of wish I was a little bit more like Philip Seymour Hoffman in Doubt right now. This nail's pretty ugly. Anyway, turn off YouTube.